This is a very important topic. As you know, there are so many disruptions happening in the technology space, and no sector, no space of personal or business life can escape the changes we are experiencing on the technology front. So we have a power-packed panel, and we have a lot of interesting questions to discuss on this theme on emerging technologies and creative disruption. So let me start right away with Rajan. Uh, Rajan, Slice is known to be a disruptor in banking. So, how do you see Slice or in general creative disruption in the banking space? What kind of disruptions you think we will be seeing in the coming years in banking and finance?
Thanks for having us here, Rudra, first of all. I actually don't like the word disruption that much and to be labeled as a disruptor. But creativity, on the other hand, is a very interesting word. Uh, I, I I think, I don't know about most of you, but I don't understand how creativity works. I believe many people do not. But I have some sense of it. It comes from a place which is beyond all of this. We don't know how it comes to us, how we become creative at some moments and other moments we are not. So it's something that I believe is still beyond our understanding. But there's some elements of it which we all can feel and relate to. Like, I think fundamentally creativity is about finding out some form of a truth that once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And to me, when you say Slice is a creative disruptor, we want to be on this path of truth seeking where we figure out some pieces of the puzzle, which we have taken thousands of years to build this financial service industry, but there are some pieces of puzzle which can still be much more efficient than they are today. And they've been built by people like us only. Like, we have had 100 billion people living on this beautiful earth in the last 300,000 years. We're 7 billion right now. So these 93 billion people build what we have today. There's a lot of respect for them. They've done a wonderful job. But we cannot meet them today. So our only way to thank them is to build on top of what they have done, and there's a reason they have done what they have done. But be able to understand, and understanding is also a form of creativity, why they have done what they have done, and then after you understand it, being able to get that creativity from some other place and being able to tweak it a little bit, to me, that's everything.
Okay, thank you for setting the context, Rajan. Let me come to a very specific disruption. So if you have been following the news and social media, you would have heard of something called Majorana 1, which is a huge leap apparently in quantum computing, which Microsoft has announced a couple of days back. So I'll ask Rohini to tell us a little bit about how exciting is this, and is quantum computing going to solve climate change, find a cure for cancer, make all our problems go away? So how big is this disruption?
Okay, let me first. How many of you understand what quantum computing is? Okay. Maybe for the rest, I'll give like 30 seconds. So today, when we work on computers, every information is stored or processed as a bit, which means it is a 0 or a 1. In the quantum world, which is actually the real world, every piece of information is a superposition. It is somewhere between 0 and 1. Nobody can tell where it is. And that is the idea of superposition. There are similar such very interesting physical phenomenon, which is what quantum computing uses for a paradigm shift in computing. It was conceived by Richard Feynman many, many years ago, and a lot of companies have been in a journey to harness the quantum nature at very deep subatomic levels to create a new paradigm in computing. Now, what was referred to as the Majorana is a different approach to developing what is called a qubit. qubit is the basic building block for a quantum computer. There are many other approaches, and there are organizations, IBM, Google, Honeywell, many others who have been at it for many years and have been creating different approaches to creating a hardware qubit. This approach is, we are as an organization betting on it because we believe this approach leads to scalability, leads to better, more reliable, less noisy qubits. But it is, again, a long bet. And I think I would leave with saying that some of these technology bets are just that. They are long-term bets, and you have to have that ability to put some of these bets in innovation, because the time length for some of these disruptions is neither predictable nor certain.
Rohini, if I can just add, your comments reminded me of this conversation more than 20 years ago. I was at IBM Research in those days at the US. There was this strategy meeting, and there was this technology person who was talking about how CMOS technology and so on is running out of steam. And he said, we need something. We need a plan B. Then this person said, and there was already a team at IBM Research in those days working on quantum computing. He said, what about quantum? He said, quantum is my plan Q. Right now, I need a plan B.
No, actually, it's a very good point, because, I mean, again, right, to your point, it is again a technology that will not solve every possible problem. People who are looking at quantum as an approach to computing are looking at some very special class of problems. Just like when you do numerical math, etc., you solve very special libraries to solve special class of problems. This is also going to be an approach for a special class of problems. So don't expect it to be replacing classical computing anytime soon.
Okay,
Or
so,
if ever.
okay, okay. So we have to, moderate our expectations a bit. Manish, coming to you, let us talk about generative AI, because everybody is curious about it. So whether it is Gemini or any other kind of work that DeepMind is doing, like Alpha Protein or Alpha Code. So where do you see the possibilities in future? So are these the biggest disruptions we have ever seen in the last 100 years? And where does the future lie?
Yeah, so while there is a element of hype, at least we feel that yes, there is a certain hyping in the short term, but for the long term, we believe there is actually under-hyping of AI as a technology. We believe it is going to be just like if you think about industrial revolution, IT revolution, we believe this is going to be possibly the most profound invention humanity has ever had. And it will shape basically every industry, every aspect of the world. So very specifically, kind of, why is generative AI such a big deal? So I mean, and if we think about the history of AI, it started as a very broad field, and there were many, many approaches to AI. There was one approach that took off, which was machine learning, right? Maybe making machines learn from data. And then machine learning started out, again, there were so many different approaches to machine learning. There used to be all these support vector machines, various kinds of regressions, and so on. And deep learning, which was based on artificial neural networks, which in fact, in the early 2000s, the machine learning community had pretty much like given up on artificial neural networks as a technology that just doesn't work, which made a comeback, right, in the form of deep learning. So what was special about deep learning was that after they showed those breakthroughs in image classification, identifying what object is in the image, very soon after that, pretty much for a very broad class of problems, be it speech recognition, be it machine translation, all kinds of tasks, deep learning became the best way of solving those problems. But still there was a problem. There was an issue, right? That you needed lots and lots of labeled data, often millions of data points, labeled data points, before you train a model. And B, for every problem, you had to train a new model from scratch. And that's the problem which now has been tackled by the current generation of foundation models. In fact, the reason for the term foundation models that was coined by Stanford researchers is that these models today are providing the foundation for a very broad range of solutions that, be it any kind of task, ultimately. So it's very surprising in hindsight that there's one architecture, transformer architecture, invented at Google Research, which is underpinning kind of such a broad range of applications. So one in the short term that we are quite excited about is this whole notion of a universal assistant that each one of us, every person on the planet will have available at our disposal. Very, very powerful universal assistants, right, which would help us lead healthier lives, learn, kind of plan our careers and so on, right? Various aspects of leading a more fulfilling life. But one aspect which I think doesn't get enough attention in India, so any opportunity now I get, I try to talk about it, is the potential for AI to accelerate science, scientific discovery. And this year's Nobel Prize, right, you mentioned AlphaFold, are a sign, are a signal, very powerful signal that something very profound is happening. Protein folding, again, back to my IBM days when I worked on a machine called Blue Gene, protein folding was one of the driving applications. That can we understand the mechanism of protein folding using simulations. In those days, it used to take almost like 3 to 5 years of PhD level work, research, to uncover the structure of a single protein. Single protein. It used to take about 5 years. And after AlphaFold kind of came up with this AI model that works, now it takes about a second to, given that chain of amino acids and so on, to predict the structure of the protein takes barely a second. And this team basically made the prediction, the structures, or at least predicted structure of all 200 million proteins known to humankind freely available, and AlphaFold freely available. So today, again, researchers are using it for all kinds of exciting things like drug discovery, even designing plastics. But it's not just biology alone. You now look at chemistry, you look at physics, pretty much every aspect of science, you see, again, the impact of science, of AI being felt. Something like, which is very, very important to the world, right? Clean energy. Fusion, if we can make fusion actually generate more energy than the amount of energy it takes to get a fusion reaction going, controlled fusion, not the one on the sun, it could be an abundant, provide an abundant supply of very clean energy. And there are, again, our researchers, my colleagues, I just met them 2 weeks ago, who are working with these fusion kind of startups. They believe that in the next 2.5 years, right, we will reach that point, 2.5 to 3 years, we will reach that point where you get more energy out of that controlled fusion than what you put into it. So again, possibilities are endless. It's going to be a very, very exciting world. So certainly the students in the audience, I'm always very envious of you because, I mean, I entered my career when kind of I opted for computer science when I'd never even seen a computer at that time. And you are entering your careers, right, when you have all these very, very powerful computing technologies and AI through which you can make a difference to the world. So it's going to be a very, very exciting world.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So as one of those ancient Chinese curses go, may you live in interesting times. But we are glad that we happen to live in a very, very interesting time. So we talked about the possibilities of quantum computing, generative AI, or AI in general. Now moving from big tech to fintech in terms of financial applications. So Rajan, what is your view about how these technologies are changing the world of banking and finance? So, can AI help to address problems of financial inclusion or financial literacy? So how is it impacting the industry?
So there are two big use cases that we see in the next, let's say, 5-year horizon. One is all the search is getting replaced through AI, which means most of your UI is search in a way. When people are doing onboarding, they're trying to figure out which category to choose. Am I salaried? Am I freelancer, etc., etc. Then what is my income stream? Where am I getting money from? So what we have all done is we have designed very generic selection UI for all types of customers. But that's going to go away. AI is going to completely overshadow UI, and we will be able to ask a farmer in Shillong or in UP in their own natural language that, can you explain me more about the way you earn this money, the way you have your expenditure? And that will be the new UI. That will help increase approval rates, that will help increase conversions. People will move more towards this formal way of accessing credit and financial services generally. And the other is a form of thought partner or coaching, etc., which is basically customer service in the financial services world, but also some form of a banker assistant. Like you will have a bank CEO at your disposal. It will not actually be a bank CEO, but the feeling that you get is like a bank CEO, because contrary to many people's beliefs, I think humans will have much more bigger role to play, powered by AI, even in customer service. Everyone wants that personal attention when things are not going right. But by having access to the tools that we have now, humans are going to be able to service 100 customers with the experience of bank CEO level experience. And those 100 customers will feel much better than they feel today. Their problems will get solved faster and more accurately. So I think these two things will eventually lead to more access to credit and much better customer protection, consumer experience. The NPS scores could be much better with the standardizations.
So that sounds fascinating, that giving a CEO level experience to the customer. But as Manish said, each of us are also going to have our own AI assistant. So I wonder whether our AI assistant will end up talking to the CEO AI of the company and then advising us in turn.
Yeah, I think that's what is going to happen. We're going to have multiple models also, not just a UI AI assistant. Under that AI assistant also, we can choose the model based on who's a better thought partner to us. Like, finally, these models are like some form of a thought partners, like humans. So we can pick and choose, this is the kind of thought partner I like more under the UI layer, and then that thought partner is talking to some other company's thought partner, which they have chosen based on their taste or the kind of company they want to be. It just makes a lot of sense.
Right. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the economic impact of all these technology developments. So I'll come to you, Ashok. In terms of economic theory or economics research, how do we see the impact of these technologies on aggregate GDP growth, per capita income, long-run prosperity? What are the macroeconomic effects?
Professor Rudra, I'll answer in two ways. One is on productivity, other is on inflation, which are the two bedrocks of sustainable macroeconomic growth. So the economic theory basically worked on, from Paul Romer, I would say, basically understanding innovation as the key for long-run growth, right? And productivity, output per worker basically increases. There was a problem in the neoclassical economics by Solow telling that after a point of time, US would stop growing and Ghana is going to converge. But that never happened. The empirical theory saw that US kept on increasing. That's precisely because of the innovation, the amount of money which has been put into R&D, and there is an invisible value of theta, which I could relate with Manish, the ability to basically create new ideas given the stock of ideas. So it is a trait of certain countries to basically do this. So once this has picked up, we had this tremendous productivity growth, which almost stopped by 2000, 2010, I mean, close to this GFT. So then we had a productivity slowdown, and this productivity slowdown is a matter of concern, which though we are telling that R&D expenditures of most of the countries have gone up, but productivity has not improved over time. So this is precisely been studied in academic literature, and some of them point out that small companies, because they are small, are willing to innovate more. And it is the non-corporation, I mean, or less competition at some point of time, regulations helping bigger companies to innovate much faster, or could be that the web of patents, which is not allowing diffusion of knowledge happening for smaller companies, which could be the reason why productivity growth is not increasing. But coming to the second important point about inflation, which is a growing concern. Economic theory basically talks about, let's say when technology goes up, inflation basically comes down. This is a very, there's a recent paper on financial innovation which looks at aggregate advanced economies and emerging economies, and you see that 10% increase in internet usage in India increases the GDP by 1.67%, and inflation reduces by 0.06%. Now, how does it work out? By simple economics, we could say that when innovation happens, digitalization happens, well, there could be a reduction in marginal cost, which you have studied in your class, and therefore prices, cheaper goods come, and consumers can have second. Second is online presence allows people to basically choose a lot of things, and which forces companies to reduce their margins, and that's how inflation can come. Innovations in digital spaces, especially fintech spaces, etc., therefore allowing access to credit to go and cost of credit comes down. Labor markets, basically digitalization helps in creating or reducing demand for certain goods like automation, etc. takes out. Wages comes down, and these things can basically significantly influence innovation. So what, at the end of the day, economic theory basically talks about innovation as a key driving force for economic growth, long-term growth, productivity, as well as reducing inflation, which are the two important macroeconomic objectives of every country.
Can I ask? Yeah. I think in the context of India, just to your comment, is it only about productivity, or is it actually about access to certain services, like, or being able to have inclusion, meaning a greater number of the population being part of the economy with education, healthcare, skilling, etc. I mean, how do you think about that? Because that, to me, is more than productivity, right?
Exactly.
Just curious about your comments.
When it comes to, let's say, digitalization, there should be two complementary factors which should work out. One could be the education, whereby these skilled people could use digitalization. Second is the role of governance, which basically improves the quality of living and makes sure that corruptions are less, and the benefits reaches every one of them. So it's not only productivity, but there should be complementary factors which should help this to
So
come.
yeah, so I think we get too focused on productivity in terms of purely GDP per capita, but you're right. I mean, unless that translates into overall well-being by providing access to each of these social infrastructure to the people.
See, I think for India, if I may just build on that point, I think for India, the greatest opportunity is the ability for a very large section of people to have access to healthcare in their language using AI at where they are. And I think that bridge, I mean, Chandra has written a very good book called Digital Nation. I keep quoting that all the time. But in sectors like, think of education, now the ability for a child, for a student to have a personal tutor, that changes the whole equation of access to education, access to opportunities. I think for India, that is the greatest opportunity and maybe Manish can build on that. But to me, I feel, we keep talking, sorry, I picked up on the productivity, but I think we talk about demographic dividend, we talk about, skills and all of that, but the way this today's AI is able to cross the language barrier, cross the barrier of the AI can see, can hear. You can show it a crop that is spoiled and can tell you what is potentially wrong. That changes the paradigm of access to information, opportunities, health, at a scale that could not have been possible earlier. And to me, India, that is the greatest opportunity.
You wanted to...
So I absolutely agree with Rohini, and if you allow us to kind of feed questions, right, for ourselves. I mean, that has been the entire focus, at least of my team in Bangalore, since we started our journey 5.5 years ago. I consciously picked this theme of inclusive AI. And being in India, I felt it was kind of our responsibility, right, to think about how do we develop AI in a manner that brings benefits to everyone, especially the billions, right, who have previously not been touched by AI in the world, and definitely hundreds of millions of people in India. And what at least our experience has been, it's been very, very gratifying journey, because a lot of our work has not only led to kind of tangible benefit, right, that we have seen to people in India, but beyond India. Like, it has led to global leadership in certain things. I'll give you one example of languages. An obvious area, right, for us to work on was make these models work, right, for Indian languages. And there is a big gap between capabilities of all models, be it OpenAI's ChatGPT, be it Anthropic, be it Google. The capabilities, the quality of the model on English is far better than the quality of the model, right, on other languages like English and so, like Hindi and so on. So our team has been working on making these models massively multilingual. Part of our work prior to Gemini to build that previous generation of model work over 1,000 languages allowed the Google Translate team then use that model that our team built to, in one shot, they added 110 new languages to Google Translate, covering 614 million new people whose native language was included for the first time. And the joy that it brought, I mean, it was heartwarming, some of the messages we saw from people. And likewise, I mean, even sometimes it takes you in unexpected paths. So, like another team that I told, I gave that direction that make our AI models work on these mobile devices, right? Because mobile devices are the only digital device for hundreds of millions of people in a country like India. So as they develop their technique, that is when this whole LLM revolution happened. So, and this became a multi-billion-dollar problem on the high end, on the servers, because it's no secret. I mean, I'm not even sharing any confidential data. I don't have access to confidential Google data. I pick it up from the public statements that Google, Microsoft announced, right? They are investing $80 billion in AI, hardware for AI. Google announced $75 billion investment. So every company is investing tens of billions of dollars per annum in hardware that is serving these Gen AI workloads. And our team's work has already gone into kind of giving significant efficiency benefits. Because a lot of those techniques were previously developed for mobile phone, but then when adapted to servers, they ended up delivering extremely large gains, again, giving at least a lot of, we take pride in, okay, Gemini 2.0 being extremely, in fact, it was great to hear Rajan telling me privately that, one thing which I really like about Gemini 2.0 is very fast. I said, okay, I'll convey the compliments because our team's work has gone into making those models very fast. So there are all those benefits, right, that you get by pursuing that path of inclusion.
So continuing on India, one of the things that everybody talks about is the technology battle is being fought between USA and China. US is investing billions of dollars. Stargate project is going to spend $500 billion. And then China has come up with DeepSeek, which costs much, much less. So where do you see India in this? So for example, Rohini, when will we join this race, and what is Microsoft doing in India? Do you see any investments in this direction, and where India will stand in the future?
So the answer, okay, let me take an India view and then a Microsoft India view.
Yeah.
I think India has shown some very promising approaches, if you think about some of our India stack, Aadhaar, UPI, etc. Innovation at scale, at price points which are to be compared with the rest of the world. I think AI is one place where, while India today is adopting AI and needs to do more of it, whether it is from the government side or the startup side. I'm looking at those two lenses. So the government, as you know, has an India AI mission, and that has got fairly comprehensive plans to create the AI ecosystem in the country. What I do see is the place where India will adopt AI is from the startup side. Because I feel the startups are where their ability to disrupt, their ability to see the technology and its potential and connect it to real problems in a way that is economically viable and grows at scale. We had the previous panel, remember, and we was talking about the willingness to pay. And I think that ability to create those viable business models is where I think India has the strongest ability. Now, the second point I would say from a Microsoft perspective, we've been now in India for 30 years. Microsoft Research has been in India for 20 years. Very recently, we celebrated that. And a lot of the work that happens, just like Google Research, a lot of the work that we do in research in India also has a fairly strong social impact element. So if you've heard things like Digital Green, if you've heard things like Karya, Bhashini that you know is the national language mission, a lot of these have spun out or have had contributions from Microsoft Research. Having said that, I think the one organization, and of course from a investment perspective, our CEO was here recently and all that will keep going. But I think the ability for India, our young people here and our startups to really understand this moment, this technology, and what is the art of the possible with this technology today, and grab problems and take that risk and go after them with an entrepreneurial mindset is, to me, the need of the hour to be able to capture this moment. No one company, the large Microsofts, Googles of the world are going to do this for India. That's for India's youth, India's startups, India's entrepreneurs to really do. Microsoft, Google, all these are providing platforms. These are platforms to help you accelerate any innovation, experimentation that you want to do. But at the end, the last mile of problem solving, value creation, scaling has to be done by entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
Manish,
no, absolutely agree with Rohini. And if I could, again, back to your original question, right? In fact, I've been propagating for a long time, long before DeepSeek entered our public consciousness. I had been arguing, despite being at Google, right, and providing our foundation models, that yes, India should be developing its own foundation model, right? Multiple organizations in India, right, should be developing foundation models. And there was that kind of a, whatever, sometimes what I feel, and sometimes people say, oh, is it money, or we don't have the money, we don't have the talent. I've heard a lot of these arguments. And my view is very simple. It's not lack of money, it's not by any means lack of talents. It's usually lack of ambition, lack of boldness, lack of guts that comes in the way. A lot of times we in India, we are very scared of doing, if there's anything that has never been done ever in the world before, we are very scared of doing it. And we are very skeptical. Oh, what if there's a fail? What if it doesn't work? We are very afraid of failures. And I think space is a technology, we were talking earlier, which has shown the way. I mean, ISRO has, despite being so far behind, right, starting so far behind other nations. In fact, we were hosting Dr. Narayanan, ISRO chair, at our office 2 days ago. And it was such an inspiring talk. He talked about how he was a child in a village in Kerala when he heard the news about man reaching the moon, and how far behind India was when the space program started. And then he reeled off a whole bunch of things where India is the first country in the world to have done it, right? Things like landing, soft landing on that other side of the moon, launching a set of 100+ satellites in one go from a rocket. The Mangalyaan, the cost at which we did it. So I think we have seen some shining examples, right, where people have had that guts to go and do things, right, first of a time in the world. So to me, in a way, it was disappointing that it took DeepSeek for people in India to now arrive at a consensus that, yes, we should be building foundation models, but then I say, der aaye durust aaye, the Hindi saying, okay, better late than never. But going forward, I hope we will have the guts, the confidence to do things which have never ever been done before.
In fact, I remember discussing with some people who, and I will not name, that I think it's time for India's Mangalyaan moment in AI. Exactly those words. Because the ability to think differently, to use free gravity, it was different.
And the last word hasn't been heard, right, on how to build foundation models. If we take inspiration from how the human brain works, human brain does all of that computing at an estimated 20 watts in power consumption. These days, right, every company, be it Google, be it Microsoft, every company is now negotiating deals with nuclear power companies, right, to power the next generation of data centers because of the amount of power consumption. There's got to be a better way, far more power efficient ways. Yes, my team has done some work showing you 2x, 3x, maybe in some cases 10x gains, but we need to come up with innovations that will lead to million x gains in power efficiency.
Since you talked about the need for Indians to think differently, so I'll just go back to Rajan, who thought about banking and credit differently. So, Rajan, do you think that using technology, fintechs will eventually replace the brick and mortar banks, or do you think fintechs will force banks to become more like fintech and less like banks? So will banks and fintech coexist, or will they all converge to one model, which is the technology model?
I think the right person or right set of people to ask this is RBI. Because finally banking is a very regulated sector. And it's for the regulator to decide how they want banking to go in this country. But generally speaking about the world, there are various examples. So there are some countries in which there are deeply regulated banks which are protected from some of these disruptions, so to say. And then there are thin layers of fintechs which are allowed to operate at a slightly more higher level with very niche areas. Like in Brazil, you have Nubank. They're not a full bank in Brazil. They have a license for doing money transfers through credit card-like instruments, and then they have a license to take deposits for very specific things where they can invest those deposits in. And their full banking license has very different set of regulations. So in a world where things are changing so fast, like literally 12 months back, there are, I was just talking to my engineering team last week. There are 5 different companies that exist now where we are trying to figure which one to choose from, and these companies didn't exist 12 months back, and all of these companies are going to make our work 2x better, 3x better. In a world that is moving so fast, it has to be the existing systems, going back to the previous analogy of existing systems and all these humans that existed in the past, they built that. We will have to find out how they have worked, why they were chosen, and then build on top of it. There's no option only. Like, there are clearly inefficiencies. For example, we have $420 billion of cash in circulation today. If you count for like 4 to 6% inflation, there's a loss to the person who's holding the cash, right, to the extent of $25 billion. There's $750 billion in savings bank account. And these days, millennials and Gen Zs have become smarter. That led to some of the stock market boom in the last 3-4 years. But they're looking for alternatives on if they're putting money in savings account also. And the risk-free rate in India is somewhere determined by the benchmark repo rate, which is at 6.25% today. But if you're keeping money in savings account, it's not like you are completely beating inflation. There's still a lot of inefficiency. And a lot of people don't realize that, don't understand that. If you're earning less than 50% repo rate, 40% repo rate on this $750 billion, there's still almost the same amount of loss from inflation that is happening on cash. And people will get to learn more and more these things through better coaches and thought partners, and they'll be able to make more informed choices. So there is no choice that we have. We'll have to become more efficient from where we are today. But the pace at which that will happen is a very, very nuanced and complicated subject. There is a lot of existing architecture, and these kind of things can lead to financial stability related questions also. So that has to be very well thought through and then decided by a committee somewhere by the right set of regulators.
But quick follow-up, big data firms have far more data than startups will be able to have. Although Rohini talked about the importance of entrepreneurs and startups pushing the curve, but do you think fintechs can compete with big data? I mean, Amazon obviously has more data, or even Netflix or Google, than a fintech firm.
See, I agree with you. They have. So actually, let me say this. Like, right, where do we fit in as humans, right? If you're saying there's so much of AI that is going to change things, and they're all thought partners. They're like very intelligent. They have access to infinite memory, and they can instantly recall that. These are like compression models which have never been built before. And it's a spectacular technology. But where do we fit in finally? We fit in our agency, right? Finally, we have to choose. Even if the customer support is talking to the customer, my agent is talking to the customer support of some other company. Finally, I'll get a response, and I have to choose whether to be angry at that response that I got or be happy with that and just move on with my life. So I can still choose to be angry that, hey, this is a very bad response. What are you talking to me? You don't understand. You don't want to service the customer properly, and that will lead to another response by that thought partner. And again, I have to choose whether I'm satisfied or not. I got the resolution. So that agency is what we all contribute to the world. That's our value. And that's where small startups will always remain very relevant, because over time, like the larger companies, somewhere it becomes bureaucratic and you lose that sort of agency, right? And people follow a certain system, and that's where startups come in, and with the agency they have, the kind of focus they have on smaller problems, they find niches that eventually become very large. All the big companies in the world finally are like that. So that doesn't change as long as we all exist, and there's no true AGI that comes in.
So you mentioned agency also of the customer. So that brings me to the issue of financial literacy and digital literacy. Because again, when we are talking of things like access, which Rohini mentioned earlier, we need people to have that. And I know Ashok has some interesting research on financial literacy and digital literacy. Can you share some insights on how do you see the importance of digital literacy or financial literacy?
I see on the right side, I have Rajan, who is a supplier down here, and there are some regulators like, let's say, Mrudu Sagar, ex-regulator, right? But I bat for the household, right? The household at the end of the day has to take a decision, a financial decision, how much I have to save, how much I have to invest. Now, there could be an agency which is there, and that's the agency which we talk about financial literacy. And it has to be financially inclusive. It has to be representative to the whole Indian population. So some of our research basically worked with women entrepreneurs, and we tried to see in this growing digital landscape, if we are given digital financial services, if you give them a financial training as well as a digital training, which will work for them? Will they improve their financial decision making? So fortunately, some part of it has worked. So for us, the digital skills have improved. But unfortunately, the financial literacy has improved. The knowledge has improved, but it has not translated to good financial behavior. So then we thought about the possibility that it is possibly because we have given them training on a workplace, or maybe the training should not be given on that age group. So right now, there is a research team at IIM Kozhikode, which I am also a part of. We are giving training to young students of age 11 and 12, because we find that the financial attitude is forming at that time. So why don't we give a financial knowledge training, which would basically change their financial behavior? So once there's a gap between financial knowledge and attitude is reduced at school level, which can improve their financial behavior over time. This is also good for the NBFCs or banks, because you would have a more careful customer. They would have a more careful lender. You would have a person who would be thinking about saving his money rather than spending it all the time, right? You would have a person who use productive loans rather than using it for unproductive purposes. So that's the way the research is going in India. And that's a very important area of agency which we are trying to solve. And we want to see that whether giving at the school level works out, then we should basically make it as a public policy to improve financial literacy at school levels. So which could solve our financial access problem, inclusivity problem, and decision-making problem of households, I mean, future households in a much better way.
So while we are trying to improve their agency, obviously they are still exposed to a lot of cyber threats and financial risks. So what is your view, Rohini, on how can we manage cyber security risks that the general population gets exposed to?
See, first of all, I think today we know that there is a lot of problems of fraud and people getting scammed, etc. So there's a lot of that going on, which goes back to, it may sound trite, but it goes back to awareness. Because I think in a country that is getting digitally enabled, whether it's from perspective of, in fact, I was going to talk about that even to the earlier thread, but I think the ability for people to, and I'm in my mind, the common person I'm having in mind is a, say, middle income woman sitting at home, right, who may not be going out to work. How do you get that person to be digitally aware? That is probably the biggest challenge that the country is facing. But I think the ability for AI, since we are talking a lot about AI, to also look at patterns at macro level, ability to look at digital signals, be able to look at certain fraudulent pockets. Some of those becomes a lot more feasible and even accessible if you are using the right technologies to be able to help in some of the triages. But you see, it is not a one-size-fits-all, because at the end of the day, if the country is moving in a direction of increased digitalization, and if you're going down the path of further e-commerce and the fintech revolution that we are part of, it will have to go hand in hand. Now, of course, there are organizations, startups like Equal, etc., who are also going down the path of being able to create agency at the consumer level. So it is not just at the provider level, but also at the consumer level. Can you have AI being able to have an interception to be able to create a diversion to then figure out if this is a fraud call? So there's the technology elements of it, but there's a lot of people element that comes into picture, especially if you think about financial services and issues of fraud.
So something you mentioned, how do we improve the digital literacy of the, let's say, the poor woman entrepreneur? Can AI help in doing that, to improve digital and financial literacy of the poor entrepreneurs, women?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, so in fact, one example is, I mean, there are examples at all different levels. On one hand, I've also seen Google's team up with some singers who created this beautiful song that went viral on YouTube. Google ke sang milkar gao, scam lage to mauka gawao. Right? So one is awareness, right, about all of these scams, the way these scams spread, and how do you kind of protect yourself. But also there are things you can do at the technology level, because on Android, for instance, my colleagues have been working on, can you ultimately, even in a very privacy-preserving manner, analyze the conversation and start to warn people that, look, this conversation seems to be taking a turn where it looks like a scam. And in fact, my colleagues from Google Pay, they very proudly tell me that, yes, they have employed all these AI-based methods. And their estimate is that they, just last year alone, I think their estimate is they helped save fraud on at least 41 million transactions and kind of covering a lot of money.
I think, I mean, just to add to what Manish is saying, I think, see, some of the basic cybersecurity hygiene factors passwordless, multi-factor authentication. Some of those things will have to become hygiene, especially we've got young folks in the crowd here. I think for you folks at your own personal level, are you following multi-factor authentication? Are you following basic hygiene factors in terms of how you manage your passwords, et cetera, right? So I think those things you will have to learn, because as your life becomes more and more in the digital world, your ability to be both aware as well as pretty smart about managing your life, your assets, your aspirations in the digital world will become important, that you learn aspects of cybersecurity and privacy.
So on that note, since you guys are the creators of these new technologies, which has impact on all our lives, without going into the debate of whether technology will replace jobs or create new jobs, what kind of skills or mindsets do you think professionals should try to adopt to survive in this digitally turbulent world? Any advice?
Yeah, so to me, it starts with fundamentals. Kind of, certainly, I think everybody should start to educate themselves on certain fundamentals. And the other thing is just learning to learn. You have to, instead of fussing about, okay, what are those skills that are going to prepare me for the next 10 years or 20 years and so on, just be willing to learn. Because technology will keep evolving, the world will keep changing at a very fast pace. You have to be just prepared to keep learning. And some of the fundamental kind of skills that at least often people have been talking about are things like empathy, creativity are going to become more important than ever.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, see, today, like for example, Rajan also was saying about your personal assistant, right? Today, I mean, I'll give you a very simple next step. Whatever next you are doing, if you pause and think, how will AI help me do this better, differently, faster? That is the first question you need to ask, because today it is so accessible, so easy to use. I mean, for me personally, I don't go into any meeting without first asking a co-pilot, how should I prepare for this meeting? And the ability for AI to go into all kinds of files, into the web, in fact, it asked everybody on this panel what all backgrounds they have and helped me prepare before I got here. I mean, basically the point is that your ability today to do anything that you're doing, make AI your friend. Make AI your friend, that mental attitude. There is no some big list of things that you need to prepare for. Make AI your friend today.
Let me try to end with some crystal ball gazing. Let's try to hear your bold predictions about the future. So what would be, each one of you, if you were to try and make one prediction about the future disruption in finance, technology, or fintech? Rajan, what would be your prediction?
I would say probably the UI will not exist the way we see it today. Yeah. So that will lead to maybe in India, for India specifically, for example, UPI is used by 300 million people. It'll probably be used by 800 million people, because the kind of UI that we find intuitive, many people do not. It'll lead to people understanding things far better, because they don't have to search for it. They can just speak in natural languages. Another prediction I'll make is on what you were asking earlier, like what do people need to learn more? I think languages. So we are moving to a level of abstraction which is natural languages. So world moved from assembly to Python earlier, where we used to speak to hardware in very low level languages like 0, 1, but we moved to Python, which was a big thing. Now we're moving to English, Hindi, and all these other languages. So our ability to understand the languages, being able to negotiate with AI will matter much more than probably learning about maths and social sciences, etc.
Ashok, your prediction for the future?
On a lighter note, I want my AI to catch all the students who have copied on my exam using their AI, right? But that's a lighter note. But I see great potential of AI in education, particularly for a faculty like me, where I don't have to use a lot of time to grade, which is a very monotonous exercise. And instead, basically, also create content which resonates with the students. That could be one of the most important thing. And secondly, on research front, I would believe that AI and the gamification can solve some of the pressing issues which we are trying to look at from the point of view of financial inclusion, or could be training at what ages, continuous training, etc., and looking at their behavioral patterns over a period of time.
One bold prediction?
Yeah,
Manish?
so at the macro level, I see a world of abundance where we have free energy, where pretty much we have cures to all of those diseases and so on. But of course, humans are pesky animals, right? They always create problems for other humans. So I do worry about how do we then utilize AI in a manner, right, that we amplify the good of it rather than the potential to do harm. And then at a very micro level, building on the theme that Rohini started talking about, right, is this inclusivity. I mean, whenever I've been challenging our team working on languages, right, I often talk about that laborer's daughter in Chhattisgarh, right? How do we give her access to the same level of information as you and I, right? Those of us in this room who are the privileged ones who understand English, how do we give her access to the same level of information in her native language? Now my aspirations for that laborer's daughter are bigger. Now I think about how do we enable her to do Nobel Prize winning work in the future, because she will have access to the entire scientific literature of the world, any kind of learning and so on, right, would happen. But mind you, Nobel Prize winning work in the future is going to be require a far higher bar, right, than a Nobel Prize today, because enabled by AI, a lot of what counts for a Nobel Prize today, right, will become ordinary.
Rohini, your prediction?
I think predictions in technologies is, I think the only prediction I will make is that the pace is only going to increase. It's only going to increase, and I think each person, your superpower is going to be your curiosity. Your curiosity, because the questions just remain to be asked. Answers are there.
There is this saying, prediction is hard, especially of the future.
Yeah, that's a good one. So the panelists have specifically requested me to take a couple of questions, so I have to oblige. Can I have any question from the audience quickly? Keep it short and quick. Yeah, over there. Go ahead, go ahead. You can stand up and just speak quickly and loudly.
Yes, very good evening, everyone. So, my question is, what framework are needed to govern the integration into financial institution, and how can we ensure that AI-driven decision-making remains transparent, fair, which is very important for us?
How can AI integrated decision making be fair?
Yes.
So I think there is a lot of work that organizations are very intentionally doing on the broader area of responsible AI. And responsible AI, one of the key elements of that is fairness. Now, fairness as a term is actually, if you've thought about it deeply, is actually quite nuanced. It's much more than equity, it's much more than equality and inclusiveness, right? So I think there is a lot of tooling happening, there is policy making that's happening. Today, if you say that are all, let's say, hiring machine learning models, are they all fair? No, because many of them, the data that they have used from the past, the data has biases. That is why organizations have tools and techniques to help understand if the data that was used has hidden biases in it. But it is not just a tooling problem. It's also organizations' ability to understand what are the techniques they are using. But the broad area of fairness is, to me, part of a suite of considerations that one needs to think about, including privacy, security, inclusion, accountability, transparency, that are responsible AI areas that many organizations, including Microsoft and Google, are working on.
So just to add to that, I think Deputy Governor in the morning, Rajeshwar Rao sir, he gave a simple answer to that. He said that it has to be explainable. So if explainability is not good, we'll have to create systems where humans are auditing it for explainability, and hopefully like 95, 98%, 99% time explainability is good directly from the models, but if it's not, there's a system in place where you ensure explainability is there, and that will lead to fairness, just like our judiciary system, for example.
I would disagree on that a little bit. The reason I would say that is because human beings, we think we are fair, but we are not always. There are hidden biases. That's number one. Number two, explainability is one of the principles in responsible AI. It's slightly different from fairness. If you say explainability directly leads to fairness, you're making an assumption that any human who's able to look at an explainable model is always going to make a fair decision.
I wish this had come up a little early so we could have had more time, but in the interest of time, I have to close. So big round of applause to our fantastic panel. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.